So walking through Genesis here, these stories and little accounts in Genesis are so they're so deep, and they reveal like these meta truths. Today we have the account of Jacob. So he had just he ran away to escape his brother Esau, who had murderous thoughts for Jacob, and for good reason, because Jacob kind of stole what was Esau's birthright. And Jacob in general Jacob means supplanter, so deceiver. Jacob was a man who was used to getting what he wanted, and if it wasn't right there, he connived and supplanted. Didn't matter if it was a family member or not, he was used to getting his way. And so he did, and ran away from home to flee his brother from getting killed. And so at this point, he's coming back. It's been maybe 15, 20 years, and he's going back to make amends with his brother. And right before he crosses, he sends his family over to the river, and then he's left alone. And he has this experience of wrestling with a man, an angel, God. And it's interesting, right? As he's wrestling with God, Jacob won the wrestling match, which is interesting. It's like, if there's anybody that you're going to enter into a wrestling match with that you might not come out on top of, it probably God would be one of those, right? But again, there's so many different layers of this. One thing is to point out is to say, this is when God changed Jacob's name to Israel. Israel means the one who wrestles with God. And Israel's who? Israel is God's chosen people. And it's something like God's chosen people are a people who stay engaged in the fight with him. God's chosen people are people who wrestle with God, staying on the path towards him. It is this wrestling with God of staying engaged. Like, that's God's chosen people. It's interesting to think of that, of staying engaged, like just life being hard, the temptation to disengage from a key relationship in our life that's kind of just gone sour, that's just like, it's kind of slipped to spots that we don't want it to be in this spot, and it's going to take so much energy to kind of engage it. What's the temptation? It's always to disengage. The value here of engaging in the struggle, engaging in the wrestling match with God, engaging in those key wrestling battles in key relationships or key things in life. A big part of the Christian life is just staying engaged in the wrestling match. And to maybe not think so much of like this wrestling with God as a negative thing, but a positive thing. God changes Jacob's name from Jacob to Israel. Israel is God's chosen people. Maybe just one other thing here to note is that at the end, or during the wrestling match, during the struggle, this arrogant, maybe deceiver, this man who's used to getting what he wants, this maybe even prideful man, what happened? In the wrestling match, God broke him. It says God, the angel touched the hip socket of Jacob. And the scripture says, from that day on, Jacob walked with what? Jacob walked with a limp. That is to say, that day on, Jacob was a man who his weakness now was always before him. The reminder of the struggle of the wrestling match was always before Jacob. Every step that he took, that's that little pain right there. A weakness, my engaging and wrestling with God. There it is. Every step. for the rest of Jacob's life, for the rest of Israel's life, for the rest of our lives, maybe, as God's chosen people. There's that, oh, there it is. Even right now, I'm thinking of St. Paul in Corinthians. His plea, like, let this thorn, right, this thorn that Paul had, that he's begged out to God for this suffering and that thorn to pass by. And 3 times Paul says that he begged God for this thorn to be no more there. And so maybe just today is to call to mind the importance of always having our weakness before us, not in a way to get demoralized by it, but is the way to keep it before us, because what does Jesus say? Blessed are the poor in spirit. That is to say, blessed are those who know they're weak, so that they can be all the more dependent upon God. And maybe also to consider is like what wrestling matches have we maybe disengaged with, or we're tempted to disengage? Are we wrestling with God? Are we staying engaged in the wrestling match with God? Are there any key relationships or things in our lives that maybe we've disengaged and the Lord's just like, stay engaged, wrestle here with our spouse, with our children, with whatever? Are you wrestling? Let this story, maybe spend time with it and bring it to the Eucharist here today, and let the Lord speak into that. Maybe even we thank him for something that's our little hip pain. In a wild way, we even offer up thanks to God for it, as it can be a reminder of our dependence upon him who knows and loves us.